This is the harrowing story of Junko Furuta, a case that unfolded in Saitama Prefecture, Japan. Saitama, located southeast of Tokyo within the Greater Tokyo metropolitan area, is home to the city of Misato, about 20 kilometers from Tokyo, covering an area of 30,000 square kilometers. It was here that Junko Furuta's tragic journey began. Born on January 18, 1971, Junko was just 17 years old and a student at Yashio Minami High School in Saitama Prefecture at the time of these events. She was known for her cheerful disposition and sweet demeanor, making her well-liked by her peers. Her father was a sales manager at a canning factory, and her mother was a homemaker. She also had an older brother and a younger brother. The family's financial situation was modest, with her father being the sole breadwinner. To ease her father's burden, Junko had decided to work after graduating from high school. In addition to her studies, she worked part-time as a salesperson in a home appliance store or packing goods at a plastic factory to help support her family. As she neared graduation, she even successfully interviewed with a company and was set to start work after completing high school. This was to be a new chapter in her life. However, no one could have predicted that on her way home from her part-time job one day, she would encounter pure evil. What followed would leave anyone who heard it with a deep sense of sorrow. Let's turn back the clock to November 25, 1988. A beautiful Friday. As usual, after school, Junko went to her part-time job at a plastic factory. At 8:20 p.m., she finished her work and began her journey home, cycling with her bag on her back. The road was sparsely lit by streetlights, with hardly any pedestrians. Suddenly, a stranger on a motorcycle rode up behind her and kicked her forcefully, causing both her and her bicycle to fall to the ground. Before she could react, the man on the motorcycle quickly fled. As she struggled to stand up, a young man approached, offering help and claiming that the attacker was a Yakuza member who had been watching her. He warned her that the man might return to harm her, emphasizing the danger and offering to escort her home for her safety. Junko, still dizzy from the fall, didn't understand what had happened but felt that the young man in front of her was kind. So, she walked her bicycle, limping behind him. After walking for a while, in a secluded and deserted area, he stopped and revealed that he was also a member of a local gang and that the man on the motorcycle was his accomplice. His name was Hiroshi Mizuno, 18 years old and currently out of school. He then attacked her, telling her that if she agreed to spend the night with him, he would let her go. If not, she would die. Overwhelmed by fear, Junko agreed to his demand. Hiroshi took her to a nearby hotel and assaulted her. However, afterward, he didn't keep his promise to let her go home. Instead, a more sinister idea took root. He arranged for 3 other accomplices to meet him at a park. These 3 were Joe Ogura, Shinji Minato, and Yasushi Watanabe, the same person who had kicked Junko off her bicycle. At 3 a.m., the 3 teenagers waited in a car at the park. Soon after, Hiroshi brought Junko to meet them. The 4 rummaged through her bag and found a diary with her home address. They threatened to harm her entire family if she dared to escape. Junko was terrified, believing they might actually follow through with their threat, so she obediently followed their instructions. After some discussion, the group of 4 decided to take her to Shinji's house in Izase, Adachi Ward, Tokyo. Shinji's house was a 2-story building with a classical exterior. He often snuck into his second-floor room via the classical exterior. Shinji's family consisted of 4 people, his parents and an older brother. His parents lived on the first floor, while he and his brother lived on the second. Early that morning, the 4 took Junko to the second-floor bedroom and held her captive. At the time, Shinji's father was traveling, leaving only his mother and brother at home. Initially, they were concerned that Junko would cause trouble, so they treated her with care and enthusiasm. Junko, in turn, felt that the 4 of them would let her go after a while, so she didn't try to escape forcefully. That day, Hiroshi was worried that Junko's parents would report her missing to the police. So, he forced her to call home and tell them that she wasn't feeling well lately and was staying at a friend's house, needing some space, and asked them not to worry too much. Over the phone, Junko's parents didn't detect anything unusual. They thought their daughter was at a friend's house, so they didn't contact the police. 2 days later, on November 28th, the 4 of them became bored and wanted more fun. So, they invited 2 more friends to join them at the house. The loud noise from the room attracted the attention of Shinji's father, who had just returned from his trip. When asked, Shinji claimed Junko was his new girlfriend and told his father not to disturb them. Then, all 6 men began a collective assault on her. Terrified, Junko tried to endure, which pleased the group of 6. Over the next few days, Junko was continuously subjected to their entertainment. One day, when Shinji's mother went upstairs to clean the room, she accidentally saw Junko there. She had known her son brought a girl home earlier, but was surprised that the girl was still there. So, she told Junko to go home quickly. However, a few days later, she still saw Junko on the 2nd floor and again told her to go home. Afterward, she ignored it and didn't question her son further. It was December, and the weather outside was very cold. The 4 teenagers often gathered at Shinji's house to hang out. They forced Junko to strip and dance to music. They even made her stand naked on the 2nd floor balcony, causing her to faint from the cold. In the following days, Junko continuously endured their outrageous and unspeakable demands, all to prevent her parents from calling the police. Hiroshi occasionally forced her to call home to keep her parents from worrying. They saw her as obedient and compliant, which only emboldened them to torment her more. When they were tired, one of the 4 would stay behind to care for Junko. The others would go out to get food and then return to continue their fun with her. Hiroshi even used a camcorder to record these moments and forced Junko to watch them. One day, Hiroshi lied to Junko, telling her that her father had suddenly died in a traffic accident. Seeing her sadness, he laughed and said he was just joking. The entire group continued to use similar words to torment her heart. During this time, one member of the group intended to try and release her, but was discovered and warned by the entire group. Afterward, the group continued their fun with her. At that point, Junko could no longer bear it and cried for help. Shinji's parents downstairs heard the noise but did not intervene because they were afraid of the teenagers. On December 7, 1988, the 13th day of her captivity, the 6 men fell into a deep sleep from staying up late. Over the past period, Junko had suffered immensely, both mentally and physically. But she still managed to put on some clothes and run downstairs to find the phone and call the police. However, before she could fully explain the situation to the police, Hiroshi was right behind her. Enraged by her actions, he immediately hung up the phone and dragged her back to the 2nd floor. Then, he called the operator back and claimed it was just a prank by some friends. Next, he ran upstairs, poured gasoline on her feet, and set them on fire as punishment. As a result, her feet were burned, and she could no longer walk. The others, seeing this, followed suit and burned other parts of her body. Junko's wounds began to fester and emit a foul odor due to the lack of timely first aid. Shinji's parents noticed that the situation at home was not good, but fearing their son's anger and the teenagers, they turned a blind eye. Shinji's older brother also lived on the 2nd floor and knew about Junko. Out of fear, he also did not dare to report to the police. He only occasionally brought her milk, bread, and other food. Junko could not walk due to the extensive burns. She eventually had to lie on the floor and could only relieve herself right there. Some members of the group of 6 often regarded these rooms as their eating and living spaces, and what Junko had just done made them extremely uncomfortable. They even forced her to eat her own feces. Gradually, the food they provided her with became less and less. Sometimes she would only get a carton of milk and a few pieces of bread a day. Sometimes she would go hungry. Hiroshi even beat her for urinating on the floor, which dirted his feet. They continuously attacked her face, causing it to swell and deform. They found great pleasure in this. At that time, Junko was in a dying state. To them, Junko was just a source of pleasure to satisfy their desires. But now she was dirty, smelly, and could no longer meet their needs. However, they did not want to release her because they would be arrested by the police. Then an even more sinister plan formed in their minds. On the 41st day of her captivity, at 6:30 a.m., Hiroshi arrived at Shinji's house with an angry expression. He had lost over 100,000 yen gambling the previous night and felt frustrated. When he saw Junko lying on the dirty, smelly floor, he unleashed his anger on her. At that moment, Junko's consciousness was hazy, and she could barely make a sound. Her feet could not move because they were rotting, so she could only be manipulated by others. After attacking her, Hiroshi still did not feel satisfied. He found a 1.7 kilograms barbell with a metal bar attached to its head. They continuously used this metal object to strike her abdomen for 2 hours. The next morning, January 5th, they discovered that Junko had passed away. They had already prepared for such a situation. Hiroshi obtained a truck from his previous workplace and secretly took some sand, cement, and bricks from a nearby construction materials store. Additionally, he obtained an iron drum, 60 centimeters in diameter and 90 centimeters high, from a construction site. First, they wrapped Junko in a blanket and put her in a suitcase. Then, they drove the suitcase to an empty lot and placed her in the iron drum. Hiroshi was superstitious and believed in the spiritual. He feared that Junko would turn into a ghost and return to seek revenge. So, he placed a videotape inside the drum. Inside was a Japanese drama called Dragonfly, Junko's favorite Japanese drama. During her captivity, Junko often mentioned this drama. Afterward, the group mixed cement and poured it into the drum, finally sealing it tightly with tape. The group drove to Tokyo Bay, intending to throw the drum into the sea. But due to traffic congestion, they feared traffic police would stop them for inspection, so they changed direction and went to Wakatsu Coastal Park near Tokyo Bay and threw the drum into a grassy area along the road. To destroy the evidence, they thoroughly washed the truck and finally returned to Shinji's house, destroying anything related to Junko. On January 23, 1989, 18 days after Junko's death, Hiroshi and Ogura were arrested by the police for assaulting another girl. At first, they thought the police had found Junko's body, so they confessed some details about her. Only later did they realize they were arrested for a different case. Both then confessed to their crimes in the ongoing investigation and were detained at a juvenile detention center in Narima District, Tokyo. Based on their statements, the police felt suspicious and believed they might be involved in other cases, so they searched their residences. On March 29, 1989, 2 months after Junko's death, 2 investigators arrived at Hiroshi's house and found some women's underwear. Therefore, they believed he was involved in other incidents. The next day, the police separately interrogated Hiroshi and Ogura. During the interrogation, Hiroshi thought Ogura had already told them about Junko's death, so he directly confessed and recounted the entire story. The next day, March 30, 1989, the case was officially investigated. Based on the location provided by Hiroshi, the police found the iron drum. Junko was found in a state of decomposition, unrecognizable. Finally, the police confirmed her identity through fingerprint comparison. Forensic examination showed that her face was deformed, most of her teeth were broken, there were multiple steel needles in her chest, her intestinal wall was ruptured, her hair was torn off leaving only her scalp, and her uterus was deformed by foreign objects. Some glass fragments were also found inside. She was pregnant. Through the location of the call Junko made to her parents, the police located Shinji's house and successfully arrested the group of teenagers, including Shinji's older brother. Consequently, a group of 7 people was put on trial. Among the original 4, Hiroshi was the main culprit, and they were all between 16 and 18 years old. This was an extremely serious case of juvenile crime. The police later conducted a deeper investigation into the background of each individual. Hiroshi Mizuno, 18 years old. His father was a stockbroker, and his mother was a piano teacher. His family was relatively well off. Due to his parents' busy schedules, he was raised by his grandmother from a young age. He only moved in with his parents after graduating from elementary school. Because he was not cared for from a young age, Hiroshi's relationship with his parents was not good. To compensate, his parents overlooked his mistakes and tried their best to meet his material and financial needs. In high school, he enrolled in the judo department and learned some combat skills, which he often used to bully other classmates. In March 1988, Hiroshi dropped out of high school and associated with bad elements in society. Upon seeing this, his family asked him to stay away from those people and made him work for a construction materials company. But he completely ignored these arrangements. In a prolonged argument, he even hit his mother. His father immediately kicked him out of the house. Afterward, he gathered a group of delinquent, dropout teenagers and formed an organization called the Extreme Youth Association. He became the gang leader and lived off extorted money and goods. Joe Ogura, 17 years old. His father was a transport worker, and his mother worked in a hotel. His parents divorced when he was in third grade. Afterward, he lived with his mother. In junior high school, he met Hiroshi and quickly dropped out to join the organization founded by Hiroshi. Shinji Minato, 16 years old. His father was an administrative director at a hospital, and his mother was a nurse. At home, his parents often argued. After each argument, his father would vent his anger on him and his older brother. Growing up in such an environment made his temper increasingly aggressive, and he frequently attacked his classmates. One day, Shinji's brother had his motorcycle stolen. To get the motorcycle back, he asked Hiroshi for help, and the two gradually became good friends. Sometimes, to avoid being beaten by his father, he would invite Hiroshi's group of friends to play. Shinji's father was very annoyed with that group, but dared not do anything to them. Over time, his father also ignored Shinji. His mother was also powerless and did not intervene much. Yasushi Watanabe, 17 years old. His parents divorced when he was young. He lived with his mother and older sister. His mother worked in a beauty salon and was often busy with work. After entering junior high school, Hiroshi pursued Yasushi's older sister, and that's how the two met. After Junko's death was confirmed, her family held a funeral. One of her classmates wrote a condolence letter. "I never thought we would meet you in such circumstances. You must have gone through so much difficulty. We will never forget you. The principal has given you your diploma. We graduated together. Everyone will always be with you. I hope you will not suffer too much. Please rest in peace." Normally, juvenile cases in Japan would be handled by the juvenile court. But because this case was too serious, it was handed over to the Tokyo District Court for trial. The prosecution filed a lawsuit against the four of them for unlawful imprisonment, intentional homicide, and abandonment of a corpse. On July 31, 1989, the case officially went to trial at the Tokyo District Court. The prosecution argued that although all four defendants were minors, given the heinous acts they committed, they should be convicted by adult standards. This was a grave and utterly disgusting crime, unprecedented in Japanese history. The defendants' motives for the crime were arbitrary. As for the victim, she suffered abuse that ordinary people could not even imagine. In court, the four defendants confessed to their crimes, but their lawyers later argued that the four defendants were minors and had no intention of killing Junko. They only continued to assault her, rather than intentionally killing her. On May 21, 1990, after 10 months of trial, the case came to an end. Hiroshi was sentenced to 17 years in prison. Ogura was sentenced to 5 to 10 years. Shinji was sentenced to 4 to 6 years, and Yasushi was sentenced to 3 to 4 years. 3 of the remaining 7 accomplices were also detained in a juvenile reformatory. The prosecution later refused to accept the verdict, arguing that the sentence was too light. They then appealed to the Tokyo High Court. On July 12, 1990, a year later, the Tokyo High Court issued its ruling. Except for Ogura, who maintained his original sentence, the sentences of the other 3 were increased. Hiroshi was sentenced to 20 years in prison, Shinji to 5 to 9 years, and Yasushi to 5 to 7 years. However, the prosecution was still not satisfied with the verdict. The Tokyo High Court explained that under Japanese law at the time, the perpetrators in the case were all minors and thus subject to leniency. After the appeal, the parents of the 4 minor defendants hoped that they and their children would be allowed to kneel and apologize to Junko's family, hoping for a chance for their children to reform, but they were refused. By court order, Hiroshi's mother sold her house for 50 million yen, approximately 8.2 billion Vietnamese dong at current exchange rates, to compensate Junko's family through lawyers. Ogura's father deposited a large portion of his income into a bank account managed by lawyers. Shinji's parents also knew about the incident, but they were not charged. Junko's family was not satisfied with this, so they filed a civil lawsuit against Shinji's parents. Shinji's parents were also ordered to pay compensation for their son's actions. In 1995, Yasushi, one of the 4, was released after serving his sentence. Due to constant bullying in prison, he developed anthropophobia, fear of people. After his release, he became a reclusive person who only stayed at home. In 1997, Shinji was released after serving his sentence. He left Misato City with his family, but could not find a job. In August 2018, he was arrested again for assault and sentenced to 18 months in prison. In 1999, Ogura was released after serving his sentence. After his release, he changed his name to Joe Kamisaku and married a woman shortly after. In 2003, he was arrested again by the police for another crime and sentenced to 4 years in prison. In 2009, Hiroshi was paroled and changed his name to Hiroshi Joe Kazuma after his release. In 2013, he was arrested again for fraud. The above case is one of the most horrifying cases in the history of juvenile crime in Japan. The 4 perpetrators committed the crimes while they were minors. After their release from prison, they reoffended. Even before sentencing, they had sworn that they would never commit crimes again. Immediately after the case came to light, Japanese society was engulfed by legal debates about juvenile crime. Some argued that the minimum age for criminal responsibility should be revised. Through this incident, it can be seen that juvenile delinquency has a deep connection with family education. If such behavior is prevented in time, perhaps such tragedies would not occur. Although decades have passed, this is undoubtedly one of the most haunting cases in Japanese criminal history.